This is The Breakdown. What? Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. It's Wednesday. You know what that means. My background has shrunk, and I only say that to tick people off. It's Wednesday, and it is The Breakdown. I am your host, Catherine, a.k.a. The High-Heeled Gamer, and today I am joined by the one, the only, Sean McArdle. Did I say that right?
You said it perfect.
You like the way I broke it down? Sean McArdle.
Yeah, we pronounced every syllable.
And he is the creator of Fuhrer and The Tramp. Welcome back to the show, because you've been on here before.
Yeah, I have been.
This is round 2 for you. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So for those that didn't tune in, and shame on you, and you can find the archive on our YouTube page, tell us a little bit about Fuhrer and The Tramp, please.
Fuhrer and The Tramp is a 5-issue limited series that's coming out from Source Point, and it's about Charlie Chaplin fighting Adolf Hitler and the Nazis while making the Great Dictator. That's the short pitch. It's the elevator pitch.
Now, this is based off of is it a reimagination of a book that you read, or is it just your own complete story?
It's my own complete story. It's based off of. Do you remember the movie The Interview with Seth Rogen a couple years ago?
Yeah.
That movie came out in I think 2015, and after watching it, I was thinking about, at that same time, Kim Jong-un wanted to assassinate Seth Rogen because he made that movie.
Oh yeah.
That was just the weirdest thing I'd ever heard, and it kind of creeped me out. It's like a world leader wanted to assassinate Seth Rogen. Why would you want to assassinate Seth Rogen? And it was 2015, and that was a much simpler time. Today that would be like a Tuesday afternoon, and then we'd forget about it. But so I thought about that for a couple of days because it was so weird. And also, I look like Seth Rogen, so I could get accidentally assassinated.
I can see the resemblance. Yeah, now that you say it, I can definitely kind of see it.
So I was kind of creeped out too, and watching my back. But also, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I thought, it's like, what? Adolf Hitler didn't even try to assassinate Charlie Chaplin when he made the Great Dictator. And I was like, whoa, what if Adolf Hitler tried to assassinate Charlie Chaplin? Well, he made the Great Dictator. And there's my elevator pitch.
Gotcha. So I read it, and it is very fascinating. Now, I'm not a big history buff, so there are certain things that I'm like, was that real? So how much of it is like history accurate, and how much of it is just your own storytelling?
Oh, I don't know how I break that down in percentage, but basically it's mostly my imagination, but I used real life to be the springboard for it. And then just completely went, wherever it took me. It's as accurate as Braveheart. Let's say that. Which is not accurate at all.
I was getting ready to say that shit was accurate as hell.
No, I think that was like super inaccurate. Like the princess was like 4 whenever she should have been 20, so that was kind of creepy. I think like a lot of the facts are all messed up in that movie, but that's most historical movies, True.
True.
I want to tell a good story. I don't want a history report.
Mm-hmm.
It did affect. I like just taking that as just like little nuggets to maybe tease people into studying the history of it.
Okay.
And also the characters are my own versions of the characters. But, hopefully maybe it gets you to go watch a Chaplin movie or an Errol Flynn movie. But I did do a year's worth of research while making it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was going to. Dexter Wee was the artist on it. And he did a phenomenal job.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to work with him, but it was going to be, I think, about 9 months after I pitched it to him, and he agreed to do it. That he had other projects he had to finish up. So I took that 9 months to really dig in and do research and write the story. I read, Errol Flynn and Hedy Lamarr and Charlie Chaplin, of course, their autobiographies. Read way more about Hitler than I cared to or should have. And then I've always been studying stuff about Golden Age Hollywood and that era of Hollywood. I've always been interested in, and I would return to those things frequently. Like if I was trying to figure out a sequence and wonder how like Charlie Chaplin would, imagine that if he would have directed this sequence or starred in this sequence, how would it play out? Or Errol Flynn, how would Errol Flynn? I wanted all their fighting styles to be kind of like true to their movie counterparts. So Chaplin's is kind of slapsticky and goofy, and Errol's is just super cool and swashbuckling.
And that's what I was going to add. Did you go back to these to get like mannerisms and the way they speak kind of down packed?
100%. Yeah. That was fun. And then it was about issue 3, and issue 3 is where it really takes off. Where I really, I don't know. I felt like I kind of leveled up as a writer. I unlocked an achievement, and suddenly the characters were kind of like talking to themselves. And like I didn't feel so much as I was writing, but transcribing.
Okay.
That's when it became really fun. Like, I'd never experienced that before, and that's where I really. I've always enjoyed writing and creating comics, but that's where it just kind of like I felt like this thing existed outside of me.
Okay, like the characters are legit having these conversations. Like you could probably picture it in the movie that you've seen, and it's like, oh, this feels natural.
Yeah, exactly. And it was that too. It's like I know exactly what he would say in this situation. and I would find myself like probably look, if anybody was watching, but I was by myself, if I was thinking about it, I'd probably look like a crazy person because I would just start laughing to myself. I saw this thing happen. And it was kind of gauche to admit, but that's what happened.
Now, did you ask your artist as well to like kind of not so much study it, but just look at certain things to get the mannerisms correctly? Or did you just tell them, no, this is how they would hold the sword, or no, this is how they would fly into action type of thing?
A little bit of both. Like I would send him clips of Chaplin movies, Errol Flynn movies, and some clips of Hedy Lamarr. A lot of clips actually. And sometimes I would do like little sketches, thumbnails, and stuff to send them. And it wasn't just like I also based a lot of Chaplin too off of Jackie Chan because of Jackie Chan. And I know that the more I studied Chaplin, which I was always a fan of Chaplin for a long time, but bigger fan of Jackie Chan. The more I studied Charlie Chaplin, the more I saw that he was influenced by Chaplin. So it made sense his style of fighting and stuff because there wasn't as much fighting in Tramp movies, Chaplin movies. It was choreographed a little bit different. I was bringing a little bit more modern aesthetic to it. So
now you refer to Errol Flynn and Penny Lamarr because they're also in the comic.
Yeah,
that's why you keep referring to them.
Yeah, I guess I brought that up.
Well, we knew because you wrote it and I read it, but so it kind of feels natural to discuss it that way. But so what was it about? I know you said you like the golden era of Hollywood, and I just like the style of that because it was like so classic and so sleek. You know what I mean? Like a gentleman was a gentleman, and a lady was a lady. And I mean, not that it's anything wrong with that nowadays, you know what I mean? But it just kind of was classic look to it. How much of that classic feel and look to the design of their clothes are you bringing in?
Oh, that's an excellent question. A lot, actually. Like I was referencing a lot of period specific attire and stuff. I chose them because like it took me a while to figure out who to balance out the cast of this book with. And I settled on them because I was trying to create a a Luke, Leia, and Han kind of
Ooh.
you know, you have your suave scoundrel and kind of your naive and hapless protagonist, along with Hedy Lamarr being kind of like the beautiful woman, the beautiful princess that is actually smarter than the boys and save their asses more times than not.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like the dynamic I was looking for, and then finding those characters and finding, you know, Hedy Lamarr, finding out more about her and about how she kind of resented being the most beautiful woman in the world, as she wanted to be known for her brains versus, you know, her beauty. And the more I studied Errol Flynn, it just he's so braggadocious and so like charming, and yet such a scoundrel, such a awful person, but amazing at the same time. It's like you can't help to want to be him, even though he's completely not a good dude. I mean, his autobiography is called "My Wicked, Wicked Ways."
Oh, yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah, he kind of like leaned into that. Yeah, he wasn't a great dude, but he is an amazing dude. Like all that stuff I put in there about him, like, you know, being part of the pygmy slave trade in New Guinea, and like stealing gems from heiresses in Australia, and being on sailing ships, and all that stuff is straight out of his autobiography. It's all true.
Oh, that's pretty cool, actually. So you said that it's a 5 issue series. Have you thought already like what's next?
Oh, I have. And it's right now I'm still in the midst of coloring this one, and I have a couple other projects I'm working on, but I keep coming back to these characters and thinking, you know, what their further adventures would be. That was one of the reasons why I introduced in the 5th issue, I introduced the Ministry of Ungenly Warfare. I don't know if you remember that, with Christopher Lee and Ian Fleming, Josephine Baker, and John Pertwee, which that just came from one other thing that I had found in my studying, which was that's a true thing that Winston Churchill started. He started this group of black ops operatives called the Ministry of Ungenly Warfare, and it's what eventually became MI6. Ian Fleming, the writer of James Bond, was a member of it, and there was a lot of famous people. Like Christopher Lee was actually part of it. John Pertwee, who became one of the Doctor Who's, he was part of it. Josephine Baker, she really wasn't, but she was working with the French Resistance underground and doing a lot of covert spy work for the British.
Wow, that's really cool.
French, yeah, and so I want to. Whenever in the end sequence, they're going in to you know, actually help out Charlie, and you have the big fight with the Nazis and Hitler. And I didn't want a bunch of red shirts in there. I wanted to put full characters in there, and so finding that just kind of all fit together and kind of made sense. And it's like, I would like to see where these guys go after that. You know, maybe kind of a Guns of Navarone or Bridge on the River Kwai kind of story with those guys deeper into the war, you know.
That sounds really interesting. Like I said, I'm not a history buff. Like you can ask me history stuff and I'm like, Google. So, and that's pretty interesting to hear all of that. So are you like a major history buff, or you just find things and then research it and then like, oh, this is dope?
A little bit of both. It's more I view history as just stories, and I love stories, and there are stories that are in the public domain. We can use these stories. They're just hanging there. It's like fruit off tree, just to go and pick these real stories that actually happened. You don't need to know anything about history or Charlie Chaplin or Errol Flynn to read the book. I wanted to make
that is 100% true.
Very audience friendly, but it's kind of a way to, it's a cheat, actually. It's kind of like a little bit of, I'm borrowing from history and from real life, and that's my world building, it's, kind of like Tarantino did with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You take
Oh,
some of those
okay.
characters in that setting, and
Mhm.
that does the world building for you because it pre-existed, and then
Yeah,
you're playing
yeah.
in the sandbox that already exists. And that's kind of like how I treat it. So,
No, and definitely 100%. Like when I was reading it, like I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be like totally like trying to look up stuff, but it's totally reader friendly. I didn't feel like an idiot, which tends to happen from time to time when I'm reading stuff because I'm not an expert on a lot of things, and I end up having to look. But your story was definitely reader friendly. Like I knew what was happening. I was like, oh, okay, I get this. Is that the way you've always written, where you were like, are you thinking about the reader?
actually, this is the first thing I've ever done completely myself and finished. Uh,
Oh, okay.
and I had a lot of false starts over my years, and helped out a lot of other people's projects. But what really got me to here was kind of like the opposite of that. And I write for an audience of one now. I used to think
Okay.
about the audience more, but now I write for an audience of one, just me. Um, I try to think about what, and just concentrate on what I want and what I don't see out there, what would satisfy me. And
Mhm.
I kind of go with the Field of Dreams kind of thing. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Don't think about who you're building it for. You build it for yourself.
Yeah.
And the more I started to focus on that, my background is in advertising and graphic
Ah,
design, and for nearly what 20 years that I've been doing that, I'm making stuff for other people, and
mhm.
I'm always thinking about them, and I'm thinking about the audience. I'm thinking the audience that, my audience, which is my customers, the ones that are actually purchasing and buying and dictating what this project is, but then also what their customers. So I'm thinking of two layers of audiences. I had got to sell them so that they can sell their audience,
Mhm.
and that kind of removal is removed from me, and then I finally just, that's not what I want to do. That's not what I want to leave behind.
Yeah.
I want something that reflects me. That's why I got into this. That's why I started drawing whenever I was a kid, not to satisfy other people, but to satisfy myself.
Satisfy yourself. Yeah.
And I try to get back to that. And hopefully other people like it and dig it. But,
Yeah.
if they don't, I didn't make it
You did it for
for
you.
myself.
Yeah.
Which another thing was, it allowed me to finish it doing that, because then
Mhm.
my barometer of success was not dependent upon anybody but me. So I made this thing for me. So whenever it gets printed and I can hold it in my hands, and I did a self printing through Kickstarter, of the entire graphic novel last year, and just being able to finish that, get it printed, and hold it in my hands, that was success. And that made it so much. That got rid of so much, so many levels of control that I don't have access to. That trying to guess what other people want, or trying to put my success in other people's hands. Then I'm only the person that determines whether or not I'm successful or not. And I don't know. I think of course I want other people to read it and like it and enjoy it,
Yeah.
but my own personal satisfaction is not dependent upon that. And that for me was a big breakthrough in my own self-actualization. And it's what allowed me to finish this, and it allows me to continue to create. And I think that I start seeing that too in other artists now. The artists that I really appreciate are the ones that make stuff, I wouldn't say uncompromising. I would say
Mhm.
they make it for themselves. And then I feel privileged to be able to look in to what they enjoyed and what they wanted. And I feel privileged to be able to read it. I'm not thinking that this book was written for me. I'm more driven by the artists that make stuff for themselves, and they, give us the privilege of seeing something made for themselves, not something they made for me and then got it wrong because I didn't want that.
Yeah. So the reason why I ask is because I kind of cheated. I saw your interview with Jeff, and I felt like that was such a powerful message, because I feel that tends to be the pitfall for a lot of artists and writers, especially newcomers. They are always constantly thinking, like, what does the audience want? What does the audience want? And the way you answered that before, I was like, I have to get him to say it again, because for the people in the back, say it again for the people in the back, because it is so important to do it for you, because it is, I'm somewhat of a writer and it is, when I first started, it was stressful to think, well, everybody else like this, but in the end, it's no, I like this. This is how I want to write it. This is how I want to do it. And that also translates to art as well. And we have a lot of people that are just beginning to, to write and draw, that watch this show. And I definitely wanted them to hear from you, the successor, that that it is important to do these things for yourself. Can you let them know how less stressful it is?
It is a lot less stressful, but it adds another layers of stress, a different kind of anxiety, because I'm trying to satisfy myself, and I've spent years making myself a very tough critic. So now if I can satisfy myself, I feel that I've hit a certain level of competence, that I'm not just, I don't want to make this thing so that it exists, that it's a bunch of inside jokes that only I get.
Yeah.
I want it to exist on the same level that the stuff that I love, that I really, really love, I want it to exist on that level. That's my barometer now. I want to be just as satisfied reading my thing if I can divorce myself that I do not remember reading this, writing this, making this, crafting this, that if I can just pick it up off the shelf and just straight up read it, that I would personally put it alongside, my favorite graphic novels, that this story I put alongside my favorite movies, that I have been able to reach personally for myself, that level of creation that I see from, Alan Moore and Ed Brubaker and, Garth Ennis, that the people that I really respond to, that I feel like, yes, this can exist beside these. And I try to get rid of my own ego. It's like, if I'm trying to be objective, does this fit alongside, on the shelf with the rest of my Alan Moore books? Does this fit? And, no, well, obviously not. Nobody can hit that level, but it at least belongs on the shelf below it. If I could get, that's how I rate my books too. My books, here's Alan
Is it really?
Oh yeah, all my Alan Moores are up here. And then my Ed Brubakers, all my Ed Brubaker graphic novels and stuff, and Mark Waid and everything like. And it's like, maybe I could be on that third shelf. I feel comfortable being on that third shelf, maybe. Below the Grant Morrisons, maybe.
Do you feel like you're your own worst critic, or have you gotten better about that? Like, no, this is actually legit good.
It's both. I don't let myself off the hook easily, but at the same time, it was so satisfying. I've only done this. This is the first book that I've ever done this. What happened was, like, I was writing about issue 2, and I wanted to make sure that that was flowing right, that I wasn't missing anything, that the word bubbles were all placed right and stuff, and that they didn't get moved around, because I do my own lettering.
Okay.
So I was going over it, doing a quality check on it. So I printed it all out, held it in my hands, and sat there, and there was probably like good 40 pages into it. And I'm just sitting there reading it and doing a copy edit for myself. And I get about 10, 20 pages into it. It's like, that I realized I'm just reading it, and I wrote this thing and I actually like it. I've never done that before. I've never made something that I like. And I was like, holy shit, I would actually read this thing. If somebody else made this, I would read it and I'd be jazzed.
That's awesome.
So, and I hope everybody has that feeling, or everybody can attain that. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of dedication, and you've got to read a lot of comics. You've got to study how are movies made, or stories told. How are movies made? How are comics made? I feel that you need to know every piece of the process. That you need to have a good, solid grasp on storytelling. And I kind of created, and I made a tutorial on my own webpage on the Fuhrer.com. That I broke down story beats. Oh, did you look at it?
Yeah, I did.
Oh
yeah. When we have a guest, I am stalker mode 100%. Like I'm going through everything and anything I can find. Yes, I saw your blogs, and I was wondering. I was going to actually ask you about that in a little bit.
I'm interviewing, then you can ask questions.
No, please. I like my guests to be open and free. Definitely say. But I did see the blogs, and I was kind of wondering if you were going to expand more on it and do different things on that.
Oh, I'm glad somebody read them. I didn't think anybody ever read those. I wrote them down so that I had a journal for myself, even though I kind of didn't. I made it more so that it's approachable for anybody to read it. It was more like I want to document this process, because what I did was I was never a guy that liked structure. I didn't like to have a formula. And I think a lot of beginning writers are that way. A lot of beginning writers. But what I would find is I always know how the story starts and I know how it ends. That middle part is the part where I would get lost. The second act is tricky. And I don't care if, you're doing like 6-act storytelling, Tarantino style, and going through different timelines and stuff. If you break down even Pulp Fiction, it still fits. There's a beginning to the movie, there's a middle to the movie, and there's an end to the movie. And every, so many minutes, you've got to have something that hooks the audience and continues to make them watch it. That it's always going somewhere. Same thing with reading comics. The best comics are making you want to turn that next page to see where the story's going. So what I did was I decided to just try to be I had to finish this thing. And so I decided to be as rigorous as I possibly could with it. And I'd been studying storytelling. And I keep bringing up movies too, mainly because there's more written about how to write comics, or not write comics, how to write from movie standpoint than anything else. And it's more rigorous. I mean, there's a lot of great comic books, books on writing comics too. But they kind of lacked what I needed personally. So I took all of those and I took a lot of screenwriting books that I'd read and kind of made my own way to work through it. So I broke down each issue. Each issue has a beginning, middle, and end. The first act, second act, and third act. They're usually 24 pages. So if you take that, you divide that by 3, then you're at like about 6-ish pages. But then the middle act needs to be a little bit bigger. So I would go like 3 or 4, just for your intro. Maybe 5. It's fuzzy. But it gives you a basis. And then you have your middle act, which is usually double the size. So let's say it's 24 pages, which is a little longer for most. Most comics are 21 to 24 pages. But 24 is a nice number because I could divide by 4 also. So that means I have that means I have a 6-page intro, 6-page beginning of the second act. At page 12, right at the centerfold, is your midpoint. Then 6 more pages, taking you to 18. That's the end of your third act. The next 6 pages, that's your third act. Now, breaking that down, now I know what kind of has to happen at each point. I know that we're going to introduce the characters, we're going to introduce the situation, introduce the status quo at the beginning in that first act. Now, the second act, we're going to swing up to trying to get to that midpoint. So then something has to turn and make the story turn at the midpoint, which is nicely right there where the staples are. Then it takes us to page 18, and that's where we have to have the darkest part or the biggest turn that takes us then into our finale. But that's only one issue. Now you take that and you break that down. Well, first of all, you take each one of those and you break those down into thirds.
Okay.
So then a 6-page, so 6 pages, 1 through 6 for the first act. Then I would break that down into the first 2 pages are the first act of that section. Then you have the second act, the third act. So you have.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So,
yeah.
So that you're always, so basically you're doing like, you're breaking it down into smaller, digestible, easier to write pieces. So then whenever I'd write my outline, I put on each one, I know what has to kind of happen, and what kind of story beat I need to hit. So then if you study like story beats and story structure and the hero's journey, these are things that are that we are conditioned. It's either we're conditioned to like stories that are this way, or I like to think of it this way, that stories that follow this structure are the ones that last. Those are the stories that resonate with us as human beings, that tell us something, that we react to in a way that makes sense to us, so that inform our lives, that inform how we see the world. So if we start breaking everything down like that, it gives us a guide to go through, but also it makes it easier for someone else to read it, to be able to understand it, to be able to follow it, to kind of anticipate where it's going. But then whenever you understand those mechanics, then you can skew their expectations and twist their expectations.
Gotcha.
That makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. And like for me, I thought we were just programmed to like it that way, because I took a screenwriting class, and let me just tell you, it was terrible. I was so terrible at screenwriting. It was the worst. But you learn about the hero's journey, and then you learn about your sections and stuff like that. It was never broken down the way you said it, because the screenwriting class encompassed everything: comic books, movies, and television. So it was never explained the way you explained it. And then in your blogs as well, I like it because, one, it's not like super lengthy to where I'm like, oh my God, it's 3 hours later and I'm still reading the same blog. And it's not short where it's like, well, I don't get how do you connect one to the, it's so informative, yet within a good, did you purposely do it that way, or it just ended up being that way?
I don't know. I just have a good, I think I've developed a sense for pacing. So whenever I wrote those, I kind of paced out the same way. Plus, also I had animated GIFs in there and stuff to make it interesting.
Dude, I thought those were so cool.
But like I said, I make it for me, so like I want to entertain myself.
Well, it entertained me too, if that helps.
Well, good. I'm so glad that'd be my day. But so I love storytelling. And so I love breaking it down, and I've read so many storytelling books but like I said, most of them are script writing or screenplays. And I found a lot of commonalities and a lot of things that, like, okay, this works for me, this doesn't, but I can take this piece from McKee. Robert McKee, he does his whole thing is like you start the scene at a positive or negative value, and then you end it on the opposite value. So if your character's happy at the beginning, he's sad at the end of that scene. And then the next scene, he's going to start sad, but then he's going to go to be happy at the end of the next scene. Or, if they're like suspicious at the beginning of this scene, at the end of the scene, they're going to have that suspicion revealed, or satiated, that your characters feel like they're going on a journey that way. And so I like that about McKee. So I try to do that throughout, and that makes it feel like you're kind of subverting the expectations of the audience. The characters come into a scene and then you play your characters off each other. This one's happy, this one's sad. Then by the end of it, this one's going to be sad and this one's going to be happy. Now you feel the characters dancing and playing with each other. Does that make sense?
Yes. Is that kind of the same concept too of having like the super smart person and then the idiot? Is that kind of along the same lines?
Yeah. Whatever archetypes of characters that you're using, you pit them against each other. That way, you're always and a lot of times having the super smart person and the idiot, but it's more like the naive. And a lot of times that's like an audience surrogate, and so writers will use like this to try to get the information out. They'll have an audience surrogate that the super smart person can explain everything to.
Gotcha.
That's like Morpheus in the Matrix, explaining everything to Neo. Obi-Wan explaining everything to Luke. At the same time, they're not just explaining to the character; they're explaining to the audience.
They're explaining to us, yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, Obi-Wan's telling Luke about the Force, but he's also telling the audience about the Force. And saying, this is how our world works. This is how the universe that I'm creating works. Morpheus is telling Neo that the Matrix works this way and takes him through. And that Matrix is one of the most brilliant. The exposition of Matrix is brilliant. The way that it shows and not tells, and the way that it guides us through that a lot. I mean, though, nearly most of the first half of the second act is the exposition. And usually that's a death knell for a script. But because it's so interesting and the way that they piecemeal this stuff out to you and out to, to Neo, guide you through the story, and it makes it interesting. That is the story, is trying to explain this universe. It's things like that pulling stories apart like that and trying to see how they work. That's how you add it, and that's how you build that repository of things that you can go to. For instance, so my book, what I realized when I first had mapped it out, I mapped out the story, and then Fathom Events does like the Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever. They bring back the classic movies to the theater. Well, Raiders of the Lost Ark was back in the theater, and I wasn't seeing it again. And while I'm sitting there watching it, I realized what I was doing wrong. Basically, what I did in my story was I had, Indy is at the college, and they open up that Bible and show him the Ark of the Covenant, and they're showing the exposition and explaining about the Ark of the Covenant. And Indy's, then they send him on the adventure. And in my story, here's what I was basically doing. Give him the adventure. Here's the Ark of the Covenant. He immediately gets on an airplane, lands in Cairo, goes out and pulls the Ark out of the well. I skipped going and finding Marion, finding the amulet, going to the well of the souls and putting the amulet on the thing, and the monkey getting killed and bad dates, and Marion getting kidnapped and fighting with the sword. All of the fun stuff I skipped.
Gotcha.
That's the second act. All of that stuff, like I went from point A to point B. What you need to do is you need to zigzag through them.
Yeah.
You got to take your character on a journey. And watching Raiders, I sat there and I got it. I was like, I'm not putting them through, I'm not taking them on a journey. So that's why they get on a boat, which goes from the writing in my book. So in the third chapter, they get on the Zaka, which is Errol Flynn's yacht, which in true life, that was his prized possession. That was his baby. That was the thing that he valued most in the world, was that boat. And he actually died on that boat.
Oh, for real?
Errol Flynn died of a heroin overdose or morphine overdose or whatever, while sailing from LA to, I think, Vancouver to sell the Zaka, to sell his boat, because that was the last thing he had left. So, I mean, the guy was just so completely washed up and destitute by that time. He was giving up his, the thing that he cherished the most. Yeah. So it's like, I got to get that in the story, number one. And number two, I just learned that I needed to take him on a journey. It's a journey. Let's put him on a boat. And you know what? I can make Dexter draw some boat stuff, which would be cool. He's never drawn boat stuff before. He'll like that, I think. want to make them draw a bunch of boat stuff. Yeah, and it's a change of pace. It's a change of scenery. It gets my characters on a journey and takes them somewhere else. Because before, it's like I just had them. I know that they needed to fight Hitler, so I needed to get them to Europe. So it's just like they just go from the studio being sabotaged, get on an airplane, go to London, or go straight there or whatever. I don't know. I just hadn't had that mapped out yet. Now I take them on a journey. So it's like, okay, so if they're going to go there, and this is where the history comes into play. It's like, all right, so this is around 1939-ish. While Charlie Chaplin was making The Great Dictator, Germany went through France. They did the Blitzkrieg and flew through France. Now I'm a little bit off, but it's pretty close. That's also whenever right after that, they started bombing London. So it's like, okay, so my characters are going to be in London. I'm going to fudge the timeline a little bit because they should be there whenever London's being bombed. Now I got airplanes. Okay, so now I got my characters on boats. Now I can put them on airplanes. Now I can have Charlie Chaplin. What kind of goofy stuff can I have Charlie Chaplin doing on an airplane? Well, yeah, I think there was a lot. I got a lot of cool stuff on an airplane. And that looks cool. It's a comic book. You want to see a bunch of different kinds of action and a bunch of different kinds of environments. And, and it just makes the story feel that much more propulsive. And now I took them on a journey. I didn't just push them through this plot to go from A to B. They went on they experienced the full range of emotions. Because then also I want to take them on a emotional journey too. I want them to reveal things about themselves and learn things about themselves. So
you want to humanize them, make them more relatable.
And that's when they start talking to each other. So there was like parts where especially Errol Flynn, he's so braggadocious and everything, and he's so over the top. But then what I wanted to reveal was, he is that guy. He's legit. He's cool. He is legit cool. But he's still really freaking insecure. He's still insecure. He still has insecurities. He still has his own demons that he's fighting. He's still, maybe because he's so actually cool, where everybody else is pretending by being actors and pretending to be cool, that maybe that he has an insecurity, because it becomes the inverse of that. Everybody else kind of distances themselves from him because he reveals their own insecurities. They're not the actual action star that he is. So he just always feels like, he has no friends. He doesn't get close to anybody. Nobody will let them get close to him because he reveals insecurities about themselves. Because those are the things that I was playing with. And at the same time, I'm learning stuff about myself while I'm writing that. So that's when it gets fun. Okay, so like Charlie Chaplin, one of the things I learned about through that, I'm like making the story, and this is what I would say first and foremost, find something that is meaningful to you. And that means like you need to find something you can't stop thinking about first and foremost, that you're always thinking about that story. You're at the grocery store or, weeding the garden or taking the dog for a walk. You can't stop thinking about it. That story's got preoccupation. You may not even know why. And it took me a while, but I found out why I was so preoccupied with this. And what it was, Chaplin was 50 whenever he made The Great Dictator. I was 38, 39 whenever I was starting this, and I was looking at 40. So that was one of the big reasons I wanted to make this thing. I went 40 years of my life and I didn't have anything of myself that I wanted to put on the shelf. So I wanted to make something for me to put on the shelf that was mine. And, I had gotten divorced. Throughout my 30s, I went through a lot of changes, and I was kind of recently divorced and, raising 2 kids, and I had left the religion and struggled with my faith and a lot of different things in my 30s. And what I found was Charlie was kind of doing the same thing. He was turning 50. His best friend I could not fit this in there anywhere, but I really wanted to. But his best friend was why can't I think of his name? Douglas Fairbanks. So Douglas Fairbanks was a silent movie star, and he was he played like Zorro and stuff. He was the swashbuckler before Errol,
Mhm.
and he died while Chaplin was making The Great Dictator for real. And I could not find a place where it fit neatly in there. But it did inform the tone for me, which was, he lost his best friend. Also, at the same time, The Great Dictator was the first movie they made where he did not appear as the tramp. So the character that he had embodied all these years, this is the first time that he appeared on screen and talked. This is the first time that he was not the tramp, that he did not play the little tramp. So, the movies had changed throughout the, 2070 of the beginning of sound. By 30, we're 10 years into it. Nobody's making silent movies anymore.
Yeah.
Modern Times comes out in 36. That's the last time he plays the tramp. And, you're almost a decade into nobody's making silent movies anymore. He's still making a silent movie, which is still a huge success and still a masterpiece. But that's the last time he can probably get away with doing that. If he wants to remain relevant, if he still wants to be a director, if he still wants to make movies, he's got to embrace an entirely new way of making movies and add sound. The Tramp does not work with sound, so he has to abandon that character too. So it's not only losing his best friend, he's also losing the Tramp. He's losing that character that he created and that embodied him. And
which in essence is kind of a part of him, because it's who, like you said, it's who he created, it's who he's been.
Exactly. And I never found anywhere that actually addressed that. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but it informed the story to me, and that informed who Charlie was through this book, and that's what I wrote him to. So he's a character that's still trying to find himself. He's trying to find new friends as he's entering middle age. Even though I don't make him middle age, I make him, I wanted to still retain that tramp aspect to him and kind of lean into that. But that's still kind of where he is. He is the old guard in Hollywood, whereas Hedy Lamarr and Errol Flynn are the new young upstarts, So they're the new cool kids on the block. And he kind of wants to hang with the cool kids. And while all of his old friends that he grew up with are either dying or put out the pasture, nobody's hiring Mary Pickford anymore. She was a silent movie star. So he's making those changes. Well, at the same time in my life, I'm making those changes too, and trying to find where I should be going with the latter part of my life. So that's what I would stress. If you're preoccupied with it, there's probably a deeper reason why. And try to find that reason. Don't force it, but try to find that reason.
Yeah.
Because when you find that reason that matters to you, maybe it'll matter to somebody else, Now you have something that you're actually saying. You're saying something that actually matters.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Trying to reach that person that can relate to you and relate to the story, and you're just like,
exactly. I don't just want a book on the shelf. I want my book on the shelf that means something to me. So whenever I read it, that's what I see. I see Errol's insecurities. I see, Charlie's insecurities. Hedy has no insecurities. She's cool.
She's a badass. Yeah.
She's a badass.
Yeah.
100%. I see insecurities in this too,
No, that was one of the things that I liked about her character, is that she's there. Even though there is some type of vulnerability to her, it's not overly done. And she is not like in your face, like, oh, please help me. You know what I mean? Like, she's strong, she's a badass. And she's consistent. You know what I mean? Sometimes, a lot of times people create these characters and then have them do something or say something that's totally out of that character's element. And I appreciate that you kept her consistent throughout. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, that's weird that she says that, but she doesn't like act that way. You know what I mean? There was none of that. So I actually like that. Did you actually, did you do like a character sheet
Um,
for each of them, or you just kind of was like,
well,
okay, these are the things so and so likes. This isn't, you know what I
I've done
mean?
those before. I didn't do it in this case because the character sheets were their autobiographies. So I was constantly going back and pouring through them because I still
Okay.
wanted to pull things from. Maybe I made some notes. I did make a lot of notes from those, but also I would use that as a springboard. There's a lot of things that are like true to life. There's some like little things I try to use, and I don't know how well I did it, but I did it. Like the iodine. Like, did you get the iodine? What that was all about? The low bottle of iodine, and she puts it on in front of him, and it's a true thing. Charlie Chaplin, his mom died of syphilis, and
Okay.
so he was always preoccupied with venereal diseases. And for real, he would use iodine and paint his dick with iodine because he thought that would keep him from getting syphilis. So that's what the iodine kind of represents to there.
Oh,
How
okay.
do I explain that? But I wanted to use that, so I just used it and kind of hinted at it. And I figured, the
Okay.
audience will either figure it out or they won't or whatever. And that
And
was
in
my
all
first.
fairness,
I'm a new
in all
writer. I can I can screw up a couple things. I wanted that to be in there.
And in
If you
all
get it, you get it.
fairness, I am slow to uptakes sometimes, so other people might get it. I'm slow.
I don't know. It's one I struggled with. It is one of the parts I struggled with, but it's such a small little part of the script. I think you understand their behavior, and that's the important thing. I think it's important that their behavior makes sense, but all the nuances of all the little things, then those become more Easter eggs. They're little MacGuffins. It's something that really doesn't matter to the audience. I mean, I know why it matters, I guess. And it was like just a little recurring ongoing joke. There's a lot of things like that. It's like that I'm trying to learn and teach myself. There's some visual gags that it's like, it's not working. I kept trying to play with it and make it work. But it's like, how do you make it work in a comic form? And then I just let it, I just kept it in there. It's like, either people get it or they don't or whatever. I like it. I'm making it for me. So whatever.
Yeah. Earlier, you said that there had been projects that you hadn't finished. Now that you've finished and you've seen, how great the Fuhrer and the Tramp is there any possibility that you could go back and revisit some of these unfinished projects? Or is it just kind of like a feeling thing? Like, you have to kind of be in the mood for it type of thing. I got the wheels turning, it looks like.
Yeah, I'm thinking back through them all. Yes and no, because I'm a different person now, and I'm a different writer. And I go back and I look at some of my stuff, especially that I did in my 20s. It's like it's really dark, and I'm not that dark anymore. I've kind of come through that. So I don't know. There's some that I don't think so. Some Okay, so I have one though that is like my longest. I have two that are my longest gestating stories.
Okay.
One, I am 5 issues into it with Dexter right now. I want to get the first arc done before I start submitting it and taking it around. So I really believe that if you're wanting to create comics, and by you I mean me and I mean everybody, like if you want to create this, don't, because this is where I got held up. I would make an issue 1 and have a nice issue 1 and a whole pitch for the rest of the story, and then send those out to editors, send those out to comic publishers and stuff, and then either get rejected or way worse, never hear back. Never hearing back hurts a lot. That hurts more than getting rejected, because it's like, did they never read it? Did they never even look at it? How do I get through the slush pile if they're not even reading it? Maybe it is good. I don't even know. The rejection, at least it gave me something to work with.
Yeah.
Like I had one story where it got rejected, and the feedback I got was that, it's like old people don't sell, because it was just about old people. It's about senior citizens. And so I kept thinking about it and thought about different ways that I could, like, and it's like, and the publisher made a good point. He said, how many covers of Spider-Man has Aunt May been on just by herself or at all? Do you think of one cover with Aunt May on it? No kid, nobody's going to go buy a book with Aunt May on it.
Because you got me thinking too. I'm like, dang, I don't think I've ever seen Aunt May on
Spider-Man saving Spider-Man. The only one I can think of is the one where you see her legs in Spider-Man's suit, the Straczynski one, where Aunt May discovers that Peter is Spider-Man, but all you see is her feet. Yeah, they like nannied her from the Muppet Babies. You always see her stocking. So that was helpful to me.
Well, Sean, can you let everybody know, because we're coming to the end of the road. Like, I could literally keep talking to you. You're so fascinating, and I've learned so much. But tell everybody where they can find Fuhrer and the Tramp and you and your blog and everything.
The first issue of Fuhrer and the Tramp is in comic book stores now, so you can get that whenever they reopen, I guess. Or you can actually order it from SourcePoint. So SourcePoint Press. You can order the first issue. I don't know how the subsequent, nobody knows how things are working right now.
No.
But so like you can order the first issue, and whenever you order things from SourcePoint, they have an area where you can say which comic book store you would like for them to send the proceeds to. So they will give the comic book store whatever percentage of the sale as if you bought it in the store. So I think that's
cool.
That is really cool. SourcePoint. So definitely do that. Whatever is your favorite comic book store, it's $4, $3.99. So pay that, and then your comic book store will get a check for, whatever their percentage cut is. And if you don't have a comic book store, Comics, Cards, and Collectibles in Canton, Ohio. Use that one. Tom's a good guy. He's also a financier of my book.
Okay, cool.
So, it's only possible through him. And he's one of my first audiences for all these stories. He's one of these other guys that has heard the story and knows all these characters that only exist in my head, He's
one of your go-to guys.
Yeah. So, Comics, Cards, and Collectibles in Canton. And otherwise... you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, Sean, thank you so much. I had like a legit blast with you.
Good.
And I say that because I'm always nervous with guests. I'm like, man, I hope they like me. I hope they're really cool. And like, you turned out to be super cool, super fun, and super informative too. Because I'm like, ooh, that's good to know. And I'm like, write that down, Kat. Like,
you do that a lot. You click that pen and start writing stuff.
I'm like, oh, that's good to know. Yeah. I'm like absorbent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, like, share, subscribe. Go follow Sean. I'm sure he's gonna brighten up your day. Go get Fuhrer and the Tramp. You won't regret it. I try not to, promote stuff that I hate. So I liked it. So go like it too. And as usual, like, share, subscribe us as well. If you haven't, what the hell are you waiting for? Go to issueswithshow.com. Follow us on all the social medias. Send me good memes that Jack has failed to send me. Love you lots, and see you guys next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.